Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. In this video, we're gonna break down how elite sprinters really train in the weight room. I worked with an NCAA All-American sprinter and sprint coach, Brett Morse, to analyze the top movements that sprinters use in the weight room to make real progress. So today we're gonna break down the key movements as well as typical set and rep ranges for each phase of training: off-season, pre-season, and in season. Not only are these movements beneficial for sprinters, but also for high-level field sport athletes like soccer and football players who want to create dominant speed on the pitch. By the end of the video, you should have a really good lens into what high-level sprint training looks like. So if you're looking to improve your speed to get an edge in your sport, you're in the right place. Let's dive into it. All right, so let's start with how sprinters and athletes looking to improve speed should train in the off-season, 2 to 3 months before competition. So here's what Brett described as a typical weekly breakdown for an off-season, high-level college sprinter. This would involve 2 sprint sessions per week, 1 acceleration focused and 1 max velocity focused. We'll talk about exactly what those look like a little bit later. 3 to 4 sessions per week though, the majority of your off-season work is going to be in the weight room, doing plyometrics and resistance training. You'll see how this shifts to more sprinting and less lifting as we approach the season. But for now, we're focusing on the off season. So let's start with breaking down what a weight room session looks like. Those weight room sessions typically start with plyometrics. Now, when it comes to plyometrics, most people want to jump straight into high box jumps or depth jumps, but before that, it can be really beneficial to build a strong foundation. To do that, we're going to prioritize what's called extensive plyometrics in the off season. Extensive plyometrics are lower intensity submaximal plyometrics performed for higher volume. These set the foundation for the maximal jumps that are going to come later on. Extensive plyos in the off season might include exercises like pogo jumps, depth drops to a stick, and vertical or broad jumps from a static start. They could also include submaximal rhythmic bounding drills. Because when you do maximal plyometrics, you can only handle a few sets before your intensity drops off and you get a lot of joint loading. But with submaximal plyometrics, we can do more volume, often 200 or 300 jumps per session. And this is a really great way to learn and set a foundation and improve your technique. So for example, pre-season, we might only program 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps of intensive pogo jumps. But off-season, extensive pogo jumps could be done for 4 sets of 30 to 40 repetitions. So a typical off-season plyometric workout could look like this: 100 reps of submaximal plyometric jumps, about 20 to 50 reps of stick landings to build eccentric strength and stiffness, and about 50 kneeling jumps or similar variations to introduce some concentric focused power work. Now, while this 15 to 20 minutes of plyometric work at the start of the off season is important, the main work comes during the lift. Now, here's where Olympic lifts and variations of Olympic lifts can be really amazing tools for developing sprint-specific power. We're typically not starting with full cleans and snatches. Instead, we're using power shrugs, high pulls, push presses, and landmine push presses. These movements give us the benefit of triple extension at the ankle, knee, and hip without the technical demand of full Olympic lifts. These exercises train vertical force production and teach the athlete to extend with intent. And that's exactly what sprinting demands. You're learning to apply force quickly through the same joints that drive acceleration and max velocity sprinting. In the off season, it's really just all about progressively overloading 1 to 3 of these Olympic lift derivatives and getting more weight on the bar while still moving quickly. If you can add significant weight to your high pulls or your push presses over a few months in the off season, then you're really laying a good foundation for faster sprinting in the season ahead. Now, how many sets and reps should you be doing of these exercises? A good off-season example would be going from your plyos to your 2 Olympic lift variations such as high pulls and push press, and then focusing on 2 to 3 sets of 1 to 5 repetitions. Early in the off-season, we could be on the higher end of that, and then we could push towards some maximal sets of 1 or 2 later. All right, from there, we're moving on to our main lifts. And early in the off season, you can focus on hypertrophy for these. You're gonna wanna pick about 4 to 5 of the main movements that we're about to cover. And once you have those 4 to 5 movements, you'll prioritize 2 to 3 sets of about 6 to 15 repetitions. For the squat pattern, you could choose a full range of motion back squat or front squat, or even a leg press. You could use tempo, for example, with a 3-second lowering or eccentric phase. You can add isometric pauses, for example, a 1 or 2 second isometric at the bottom, or you can even add eccentric overload if you have the equipment to do that. For the hinge pattern, a trap bar deadlift, an RDL, a back extension, or a glute bridge or hip thrust are all really good options. For the single leg squat pattern, a dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat, or a front foot elevated split squat, or reverse lunge could all be good options. These emphasize full range of motion and muscle hypertrophy. And for off-season accessories, some good options include hamstring curls, calf raises, abduction, adduction, flexion machine, and core training. So in summary, the off-season will look like some variation of this: 3 to 4 resistance training sessions per week with 15 to 20 minutes of extensive focused plyometrics, 1 to 3 Olympic lift variations, for example, a push press and a high pull for 2 to 3 sets of 1 to 5 reps, and then 4 to 5 hypertrophy movements such as a front squat, RDL, rear foot elevated split squat, hamstring curls, and calf raises, all for 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 15 reps. And then of course, you're also gonna have those 2 speed sessions, 1 acceleration focus session with at least 4 to 5 sets of 10 to 20 yard accelerations and some supporting technique work, and 1 max velocity focus training session per week, for example, with 4 to 5 sets hitting true max velocity with something like flying 30s. Of course, for my field sport athletes, I incorporate change of direction work as well, but overall, this should give you a pretty clear idea of what off-season training looks like if you want to get faster. A little bit of exposure to acceleration and top speed each week to stay sharp, but the priority is on hypertrophy work and setting a good foundation with hard work in the gym. If you appreciate all the work that goes into making these videos, do us a huge favor and hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And you can hit that bell notification if you want to get a notification when we upload a new video every Monday at noon. I also wanted to mention that Brett and I recorded a full podcast episode diving even deeper into these topics. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a Spotify link in the description below. Now that we've built the foundation in the off season with volume and hypertrophy work, it's time to shift gears into the preseason. At this point, roughly 4 to 8 weeks out from competition, we're no longer trying to build mass. Instead, we're trying to convert that mass into usable force and speed. So the focus turns towards strength and power development, and sprinting becomes even more of a priority. You'll typically see 2 to 3 weight room sessions per week during the preseason, and sprint frequency will rise to 3 to 4 sessions per week with more intensity as well. So let's break down a weight room session first. For plyometrics, we're progressing from extensive to intensive plyometrics, which are higher intensity, lower in volume. But what does that actually look like? Well, for example, now we're using intensive pogo jumps, jumping as high as possible, but for low reps with really high stiffness. We can include depth jump variations where an athlete drops from a box and rebounds quickly, and we can include more jumps with counter movements like triple broad jumps, split jumps, or kneeling jumps into a box jump or into a vertical jump. These are all designed to enhance the stretch shortening cycle, improve ankle stiffness, and sharpen the reactive qualities that we've been building in the off season. Think fewer reps, more intent. For example, 3 to 4 sets of just 3 to 5 repetitions of around 4 to 5 different plyometric movements. Then moving into your resistance training for your Olympic lifts, now we go heavy and fast. Some exercise options include power cleans, power snatches, push jerks, landmine split jerks, and other Olympic lifts. These full range of motion Olympic lifts now take the center stage for developing peak power output. Athletes have already grooved the movement patterns with high pulls and push presses in the off season. Now we can push the weight and speed. A typical preseason prescription here might be 3 to 5 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions. The goal is high bar speed and high intent. After our 2 to 3 Olympic lifts, we're going to see our main lifts with the focus being on strength with specificity. We still train strength, but with more range of motion specificity and a unilateral emphasis. For the squat pattern, for example, we can utilize a half squat going to 90 degrees with the back squat or the front squat for peak strength in that top range of motion. Brett also prioritizes barbell safety bar rear foot elevated split squats to build unilateral max strength and transfer force to sprint mechanics. For the hinge pattern, single leg RDLs, glute ham raises, or single leg glute bridges can help develop unilateral posterior chain strength. These aren't just any old leg day movements, they're really trying to build horizontal and vertical force capabilities that directly relate to acceleration and top speed. Preseason strength work usually falls in the range of 3 to 5 sets of 2 to 4 repetitions per exercise. Again, focusing on high intent, clean execution, and sufficient rest in between sets. So overall, here's what a preseason week might look like for a sprinter or a speed-focused athlete. 2 to 3 weight room sessions per week with that 10 to 15 minutes of intensive plyometrics, then 2 to 3 Olympic lift variations like power cleans and push jerks for 3 to 5 sets of 1 to 3 reps, 2 to 3 main lifts with 3 to 5 sets of 2 to 4 reps, and then a few accessories to support tissue health and sprint mechanics. The training week's also going to include 2 to 4 sprint sessions per week with volume increasing progressively each week. More flying sprints, more sprint drills, longer accelerations, and there are a few different ways that you could break this down: 2 acceleration days, 2 max velocity days, or you could do something different as well. The emphasis here is power and sprint performance. Everything is tuned for specificity down to the range of motion, ground contact times, and joint angles. This is really where your strength becomes speed. Now, before we get into the in-season training methods that sprinters use to peak performance, a quick word from our sponsor, Legion Athletic. Legion is the #1 brand of all natural sports supplements, and it's the brand that I trust for high quality protein, creatine, pre-workout, and more. Not only do they have full formula transparency and clinically effective dosage in every product, but they also make products that taste great. So if you want high quality supplements to support your training and to support this channel as well, check out Legion Athletics with the link in the description below and use code MOVEMENT for 20% off your first order. Now back to the video. All right, now let's move into in-season training, the final phase where the focus shifts to peaking performance. At this point in the year, sprint volumes and intensities are at the very highest. So weight room work needs to complement the demands of practice and competition, not compete with it. Most elite sprinters and field sport athletes will only lift 1 to 3 times per week in season. And the movements that you use need to be carefully selected with lower overall volume and priority on recovery and performance. And the movements need to be selected carefully to prioritize performance without fatiguing the athlete. In-season plyometrics are all about staying sharp and reactive. We're still using intensive plyometrics, but now we're introducing overspeed elements to take the elastic qualities to the next level. You'll see band accelerated pogo jumps, depth jump variations, counter movement jumps with band assistance to teach overspeed power, and exercises like triple jumps can still be a great option here. These are especially good if we've measured our personal best and we can compare to it and make sure that our outputs are really high in season. Overall, you want your plyometric drills to be fast, elastic, and high output, perfect for reinforcing stiffness, reactive strength, and the stretch shortening cycle efficiency. Typical volume for these would be 2 to 3 sets of 3 to 5 repetitions. Low volume, very high quality. Next, for Olympic lifts, the focus is on creating max power from less range of motion. In-season Olympic lifts shift toward peak power with simplified mechanics. For example, hang snatches, hang cleans, split jerks, and landmine split jerks. The key difference here is less range of motion. Starting from a hang helps reduce the joint stress and the time under tension, allowing athletes to maintain power output without unnecessary fatigue. Go with 2 to 3 sets of just 1 to 3 reps, focusing on bar speed and explosive intent. For the main lifts, the goal is strength maintenance and focusing on bar speed. Strength work is still important, but the goal now is maintaining what we built, not adding new stress. The squat pattern can include box squats or half squats for more specific sprint joint angles. Hand-supported safety bar rear foot elevated split squats are also a great way to add stability and force output. Bands or chains can also be utilized to reinforce speed and power at the top of the movement, so that way you can accelerate through the end of the repetition. For the hinge pattern, a low volume of Nordic hamstring curls for hamstring integrity and resilience can be helpful as well. Single leg RDLs can also still be a good option here for unilateral control and glute hamstring balance. Again, we're working overall very low volume, very high intensity. 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 4 repetitions for strength and 2 to 3 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions for power movements. So Overall, here's an in-season summary. 1 to 3 weight room sessions per week with 10 to 15 minutes of band-assisted intensive plyometrics, 1 to 2 Olympic lift variations like hang snatches and split jerks for 2 to 3 sets of 1 to 3 repetitions, 2 to 3 strength maintenance lifts such as box squats, Nordics, or single leg RDLs with 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 4 repetitions. You'll also want 2 to 3 high intensity sprint sessions, tapering as needed around the meets or games. This structure keeps you fast, reactive, and strong without adding fatigue or interfering with top speed performance. So that's how elite sprinters actually train in the weight room across the year, from off season to preseason to in season. Big thank you to Brett for taking the time to share his training videos and his advice for this video. If you're looking for a full training program to follow, Brett has a few different speed programs, and you can find one that's based on your specific goals. I'll leave a link in the description below to all of his programs as well as his social media accounts. I actually originally connected with him because of the speed breakdown reels that he does. They're really cool. So if you like this video, chances are you'd like those as well. We're also gonna be doing some collab posts, so keep an eye out for those. All right, thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you next one. Take care.